Hey folks, just a heads up for upcoming live events as part of the Spooky Spectacular. We'll be doing a live stream and live recording event at Arcana in Durham, North Carolina on September 29th. Charlie will be at the Abbeville Upstate Spirit Conference in Abbeville, South Carolina. I'll be at Splatterflix in Durham at the Carolina Theater. And beyond spooky season, we'll both be at RetCon in Cary in February of 2023. There are links to all of those and more information in the show notes to this episode. Thanks a lot.
You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey y'all, Michael here. Just wanted to let you know that what you're about to hear is a live event that we did over Zoom for Durham County Public Library here in Durham, North Carolina in, I believe, in October of 2021. This is part of that set of live events that we're sharing as part of the fall Spooky Spectacular. You're going to be able to hear other people. You're going to be able to hear some mistakes, things like that. But that's part of the point. We want you to have the feeling that you were there too. Also, in the show notes, there's a link to YouTube where you can watch the recording of this presentation. I've also in the show notes noted the timestamps for where we show photographs and things like that in case you want to just jump to that part to follow along. Thanks for watching and listening.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's library program with Arcane Carolinas. This program is being recorded and is going to be an episode of the podcast. You are welcome to add questions in the chat. Please mute yourselves, and we will do our best to get them to them as we go. I am Jenny Levine with Durham County Library, and I'm very pleased to introduce this evening's presenters. Michael G. Williams is an award-winning novelist who strives to present the humor and humanity at the heart of horror and mystery with stories of outcasts and loners finding their people. His role on Arcane Carolinas is generally that of the more mystically inclined and occult-oriented exploration of the episode's topic. As a practicing folklorist, Michael is also enrolled in the Appalachian Studies program at Appalachian State University. His horror, science fiction, and urban fantasy can be found at falstaffbooks.com or his personal site, michaelgwilliams.com. Charlie Mushaw is a fan of exploring spooky stories and history. His role on Arcane Carolinas often taps into his natural resource science degree and training, leading him off into the woods in search of monsters, aliens, and ghosts. The adventures often end with examination of legends from a scientific or historically demonstrable perspective. You can find Arcane Carolinas on their website, arcanecarolinas.com, and on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Patreon. Take it away, guys.
Thank you. That was great. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I'm your co-host, award-winning novelist Michael G. Williams.
And I had here in the notes, like, all right, first part of the intro, who we are. I feel like that pretty much covered most of it. That was great. So what we do is we have a podcast that covers folklore, myths, legends, modern weird, specifically out of the Carolinas. And we try to make it research-based. We don't just like, oh, I found this cool story and then repeat it as fact. That's a big no-no for us.
Something we've found is that a lot of the folklore that is found online about any place, not just the Carolinas, a lot of times it's kind of been copied and pasted all over the place, and the stories have gotten mixed and mingled, and we always try to pull the real history out of that.
So sometimes we wind up finding something really, really cool, like a ship's log account of an unknown sea creature off the coast or something like that. And then other times we wind up finding out that it was the one we just did this past weekend was a piece of fiction that somebody wrote, a creative writing project that then got repeated over and over and over as fact. So today's legend is an urban legend from the American Tobacco Campus. So it's a modern one. It's a sort of a modern weird story.
Which I am super into because I am a part of the Durham Community Trail Watch and spend a lot of time on the American Tobacco Trail, which has mile marker 0 right there at the American Tobacco Campus.
And And part of the deal is whoever's driving for the evening generally does not share details with the other co-hosts prior to recording. So Michael has no idea what I'm about to talk about.
Yeah, I have no clue. I am just here to react.
So like I said, we do like to try to do a little bit of research and make things presented from a historical perspective. So since our story, when we get to it, is going to be based on the American Tobacco Campus, I figured we could talk a little bit about the origins of that area before we get into the urban legend itself. And the origins of that campus can actually be traced back to the creation of Brightleaf tobacco, which is a term you hear, Brightleaf Square and all that. I did not actually know what that meant. I just assumed it was a variety of tobacco, like a genus or species, whatever, its own variety of plant. And that's not the case. The term Brightleaf actually comes from 1839. And while tobacco had been a major crop for the region for some time prior to that, the accidental development of Brightleaf or flue curing created a unique product that really boosted agricultural industry in the region. And as soon as I read that little nugget, I was like, oh, right. Because, at the state fair, they have the little village where you go and you learn all the different techniques and stuff.
Yeah, Village of Yesteryear.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, and it really connected these dots for me. And I felt like, I can't believe I didn't figure that out beforehand. So the history of Brightleaf tobacco is tied to the American Tobacco Campus through the following sort of winding walk. An enslaved man named Stephen, no surname was known, lived on the farm of somebody named, I could be pronouncing this wrong, Abisha Slade. I'm not sure how to pronounce that first name, near the Virginia border in Caswell County. And Stephen's primary role on the farm or plantation was that of a blacksmith. But during harvest season, he would oversee the curing process of the tobacco crop as well. So sort of like dual role, he had the facility with, all the coals and the fire
exactly.
to oversee the curing process.
I mean, the curing process relies on smoke in a lot of ways and heat.
Right. So the story goes that on one specific occasion, he came up on the fire and it was just about out, the fire that was being used to dry the leaves. And he was like, uh-oh. So he ran over to the coal pit for the blacksmithing operation and threw some of the really crazy hot coals that, you use to melt metal.
Yeah.
He threw those in the other pit. And it was so hot that it essentially flash cured the tobacco.
Huh.
And turned it yellow, like really, really bright yellow.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And he was like, huh. But then it turns out that, for smoking tobacco, that actually produced a much smoother and superior product. So it was an accident, basically.
I wonder sometimes how much of the history of industry and the history of chemistry, frankly, is just that. It's, a happy accident that somebody remembered well enough to reproduce later.
I saw a meme that science is basically mess around and find out.
Yeah, exactly.
Not exactly those words, but.
Yeah, but
So these days, there's actually a historical marker where the farm was. So I have a picture of that, and we're gonna share some pictures here in a little bit. And I'll show a picture of that historical marker that acknowledges where it came from. And the trade press of the late 19th century. So, everything is booming in tobacco. So the trade press was actually like, we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to write a story. And they investigated and verified the discovery of the process by interviewing people that were still alive with firsthand knowledge of those events to corroborate.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Like I said, it just didn't occur to me that this is the same thing that the Heritage Village or the Village of Yesteryear.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. So fast forward to the Civil War. And by then, Brightleaf tobacco and this sort of flash curing or flue curing technique had become the primary way for curing tobacco in North Carolina. And all the North Carolina soldiers that went off to war took it with them. And then people wanted more of it. So they would share it around and people would be like, this is so much better than ours. So the war ends. And during the Reconstruction era, it's this great opportunity for this emerging market for this very hyper-specific type of tobacco. And two tobacco peddlers named John Ruffin Green and William Thomas Blackwell teamed up in 1868 to form the Genuine Bull Durham Smoking Tobacco Company.
A minor historical note, Blackwell Street is what runs past the American Tobacco campus.
And so these guys basically gave us the Durham Bulls.
That's so wild.
And the whole like Bull City thing and the moniker. It all comes from these two guys during the Reconstruction era, realizing that like, hey, if we put our heads together, we can really make something happen here. And the old Bull building of the American Tobacco campus was the first building constructed on the site in 1874.
Wow.
And I have pictures again at the end of the campus focus section. I'm going to share some pictures of, the growth of the campus throughout the years.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, so while these two guys are doing their thing and like establishing their tiny little empire, Washington Duke, as in like Duke, like
right.
Duke guy, Trinity College founder, Duke, came back from the Civil War and was a tobacco farmer. And from 1870 to 1890, his tobacco operation started as a shed on the farm, grew into a factory downtown. And then in 1890, he acquired the Bull Durham brand. And there was like this big merger along with Lucky Strike and 200 other smaller tobacco firms. So it was this great acquisition and merging of tobacco companies.
Yeah.
And that is what the American Tobacco Company was. The American Tobacco Company was named such as it combined all these different, companies, and they're from the US. So it was all the American Tobacco Company.
Right.
So, you keep the brands because that's what people know and that's what people are loyal to. But as far as like corporate structure, they went with that. And they actually controlled 90% of the world's tobacco production and distribution.
Wow.
90%.
That's quite a high percentage at a time when its use was extremely common.
Right.
Like I think of my childhood and think, it seems like everybody smoked back then. But like, no, everybody smoked in the late 19th century. That is wild.
In total, it was the campus was comprised of 14 buildings and 3 structures, ultimately constructed between 1874 and the 1950s. And as you know now, they're continuing to expand it. Mm-hmm. And there's a baseball stadium down there and everything. So I'm going to do a quick screen share so we can look at a few things before we start talking about what lies beneath the American Tobacco campus.
Yes. I'm very into that.
So let's see. We'll do share screen, and I will share the slide deck, which I have titled Tunnel Talk. Because that's where we're headed.
Nice.
All right. And let me know if.
Yep.
So I apologize for the low resolution on this image. It was just pulled straight from the web. But I just thought it was important to acknowledge the historical marker that's in place for the creation of bright leaf tobacco, since it is something that we hear about all the time. And its origin to me is great. I love it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Have you ever thrown maybe something you shouldn't on a fire?
Yes. On purpose, even.
So I'm kind of imagining that just be like, oh boy.
I'll spare you the story about moonshine, but I'll suffice to say it does amazing things. So
so this is what it would have looked like before it was the American Tobacco Campus, and it was the lengthy title that I described from the original people.
Like that's very recognizably the building,
Yeah.
And
rail line.
Yeah, that is wild,
right? Pretty cool.
I mean, that's basically taken from that the big white painted parking deck with the like photographic murals hanging from it. That's on the loop.
Mm-hmm. Here's a view from the 20s. Pretty rolling along pretty well. Obviously, as I mentioned, buildings continue to be constructed in the 50s. Mm-hmm. Nice little street shot of some workers coming and going in the 50s. You can see the tower.
Yeah.
Smokestack.
For whatever reason, there's absolutely no good reason for me to have believed this, just always assumed that there were, a dozen different tobacco companies in Durham, but it was just one really huge tobacco company
that owned everything.
No kidding.
Then, we've got the modern era view. And I will cite all my sources on this at the end for people that are curious and want to do a little bit more digging.
Mm-hmm. I love the old warehouse there that has solar panels on top now.
Right.
That's so great.
Gotta get with the times. Get back to my notes. All right. So I alluded to the tunnels, and you're probably asking, like, where are we going with all of this, right? Like, okay, tobacco, we get it, whatever. Well, there's an urban legend that the kids are passing around these days that I had heard that I had not researched. It was on my very lengthy list. We have a running list for our show of topics, right? That somebody might say to us, like, oh, you should do a story on X or Y or Z. And I've had this topic, the tunnels and the murder mystery.
Oh, okay.
Of the American Tobacco campus. And I was like, all right, I'll get to that. And I figured this would be the perfect opportunity to look at this urban legend out of Durham. Specifically, the legend is that there is a labyrinth of brick tunnels underneath the American Tobacco campus, marked with mysterious symbols and runes that lead to a shrine that is linked to a series of mysterious disappearances from 1908.
There are like 12 things in that sentence that make me happy. So, okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So the story, it crops up on a couple different websites. According to the websites, there's an article from the Durham Journal News from December 16th, 1908, that Durham Police Chief Edward R. Chalmers implored the public for information regarding the mysterious death of a professor, Dr. Michael Pynchon, who had apparently been going on in lectures almost incoherently about lost treasure, secret societies, and an ancient language of symbols being the key.
This is straight out of Lovecraftian horror. I love it.
Thing is, the story goes on that he turned up dead in the yard of the First Presbyterian Church on East Main.
Okay, that part's harder to love.
With weird markings on his body. And when I say weird markings, several of the websites will repost like pictures of just like little runic symbols.
Sure.
I don't know what they mean. I mean, they could be, whatever, made up. They could just be scribbles. They could mean something in some ancient language that I'm not privy to. But shortly after the discovery of his body, the article goes on to state that local school teacher Ophelia Snowden began, and this is all allegedly from the Durham Journal News, December 16, 1908. Basically, almost like a curse that jumped to another person, this school teacher, Ophelia Snowden, started talking about similar things to her students. And they were unnerved enough to like bring it up. And she was last seen entering a Pender's grocery store in public. Like that's the last public sighting of her. And oddly, a runic symbol was found on the exterior wall of that same store after her disappearance when the police were trying to track down, okay, well, where was the last place this person was seen?
Okay. And this is all supposedly from a newspaper.
Mm-hmm. And here's where things get kind of freaky for modern times. This is why, one, it's like after 1900s, we're going to call it a modern. But urban explorers in 2008 were crawling around the modern storm tunnels that were built there off the highway.
Yeah.
Like the really big ones that you can see them. They're huge. They're tall enough you can walk into them. So they were walking into them. And the deeper and deeper you went into it, after they clocked it at around 2 miles of wandering through these tunnels and following markings on the wall, like not graffiti, but like strange symbols on the walls, they came upon what looks like a shrine, right? So it's got like a bunch of candles and an old black and white photo of some woman.
Okay. And did they say where?
They say that basically the people that posted about this initially were like, oh, we think it's linked to this old story.
Okay.
And it's weird. I'd like to show you what's in those tunnels.
Please do.
this is the entrance that I was talking about. I did not go in these tunnels. That is a young man's game. I have done enough urban spelunking in my younger years. I'm done. There would have to be a really compelling reason for me to go in there, especially when someone else is taking the trouble of documenting it.
Sure.
So the network begins with a very modern portion of stormwater runoff, and this is very dangerous, and I'm not advocating going in there. And just please don't.
In fact, this presentation, I suspect, is a great opportunity to avoid going in there and yet see what's there, right?
Because flash floods are a thing, and you can't always tell how does that. Speaking from experience, having fallen in one of these up to my chest, you can't always tell, not this one, but another one. You can't always tell how deep they are.
Yeah.
And if you slip, so anyway, this network begins, the network of tunnels begins in this very modern portion. There's, lots of graffiti. One person, I thought it was funny, labeled it the trippy tunnel.
Oh, bless them.
Sounds like a good time. Off we go to the trippy tunnel. But then the deeper you go in, you can see this is still in a modern part. You can tell by the concrete, the way it's poured. This is a contemporary part of the tunnel. But it's got this, follow the sun and moon to symbols with meaning nearby. And you've got, this isn't, I wouldn't consider this runic, but it is symbols.
But it's really neat.
Yeah. And then you kind of different tunnels have different things. Like this one has what looks to me like a sun and then this little triangle rune. And then the other one has just a sun. And I don't know how to decipher these things. I'm not even going to attempt it.
Ooh. See, that feels like it would be significant. The fact that some of the radiants are colored.
Right. It's a mystery. Obviously, that's an exit if you were to push that manhole up.
Those are heavy. I don't know if I would want to count on that as my way out.
Here's where it gets really weird. Some of the pictures, people have these chandeliers with candles in them and candelabras staged as you get deeper into the place or into the labyrinth, so to speak.
That's wild.
All right. So here you can see there's this dude in cargo shorts and a jacket with his flashlight looking down this modern concrete tunnel. And then you've got what looks like a room, for lack of a better word, with a chandelier mounted and a candelabra. And it looks like a window, cut out of, I have no idea. I am not an engineer. I do not design drainage systems. I have no idea why that opening would be there.
Yeah, you'd have that little recess. I don't know. Huh.
Because it's not even sealed. You can see it goes to the soil.
Yeah.
Very strange. This is where it gets cool. Okay, so you see the symbol on the wall, and you see where the modern concrete ends, and you start getting into the old pipe and the old brick, right?
Yeah.
You're starting to get into older portions and underneath the campus. And then you get to what I really like. We did an episode on not the Three-Eyed Man. What was the other?
Oh, it was Three-Eyed Man, the Catacombs under Columbia, South Carolina.
Didn't we do one about Charleston though?
Charleston, I think we haven't talked about catacombs in Charleston.
Okay, well the point is it's got this, the Columbia one's. It's got this old arched, weird, it's the way they used to make stuff feel to it.
Yeah.
So you're definitely getting deeper. And then you eventually run into this with burned down candles and a picture of this woman.
Wow. And this is under the American Tobacco campus.
Yeah, that is confirmed, legit, true stuff. All right, I just hit stop share. I should not be seeing anything at the moment. Is that accurate?
Yeah, don't see anything.
All right. So for those of you joining us for the first time, this is the part of the episode where Charlie takes all the fun out of things. So I'll start with what's real. The tunnels exist. The tunnels are real. There are symbols. There is a shrine. The chandelier and the candelabra are there.
Really? So that's all real. That's not.
That's all real. Nope. That's all real. Pender's Grocery, the store that she supposedly went into. I looked into the history of Pender's Grocery was a chain. And Pender's Grocery, the chain was established in 1900, and it did have locations in Durham. So the store that Ophelia Snowden allegedly disappeared into existed. The First Presbyterian Church of Durham, where Dr. Pynchon was discovered deceased in the yard. The first building for the First Presbyterian Church, obviously they've had several facilities throughout the years, but was in 1876. So that would have been there.
Okay. That's all looking pretty good.
Yeah, until you realize that the Durham Police Department is going to keep records of their chiefs of police. As recent as 1908. And you find out that the chief of police was somebody named J.F. Freeland.
Oh, okay.
And again, at this point, as I'm like crawling through the historical record, I'm like, well, maybe they meant the sheriff, right?
Yeah.
Like city police are different than sheriffs or different than constables. I feel like I use the word constable too much.
You do use the word constables a lot, but I like it because I like Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So go for it.
It's old-timey speaker copy.
The constabulary.
Right. So I was like, okay, well, Durham Police, has a long history of their chiefs of police. It's just a part of their record keeping. And they have like a nice page on their website where you can go and you can go way, way back, like earlier than this time period.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I have to cough. Apologize. Here's where, well, we won't get to where they lose me.
Okay.
Ophelia Snowden, no records for Durham. There are people named Ophelia Snowden in the world.
Sure.
Ophelia Snowden have existed. However, in the city of Durham during this time period, I could not locate any Ophelia Snowdens.
Yeah.
I could not locate any Ophelia Snowdens in the surrounding area for this time period. So that's a little problematic. It starts getting really off the rails for me. There was no newspaper called the Durham Journal News.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm like, well, this is silly. But fortunately for us, ABC 11 ABC 11 figured it out and contacted the person that posted the very first blog post about this, because it got reported by a few sites. It's just like, I don't know.
Right.
And that's cool, I guess. One person gave it way too much credit, was this is real. But ABC 11 got up with the person that wrote it. And it's an artist that created it as like a geocaching LARP.
Wow. But that's pretty cool in its own right.
Right. And like that brought me right back in as to being okay with it.
Yeah. That's really neat.
So they use a pseudonym and, they're an artist and they really enjoy urban exploration and going to tunnels. I think it's pretty cool. They took ABC 11 on a tour. They said, get your waders. We'll go. And I'll show you what I did and how I did it.
I love this person. That's amazing.
So they did it. It's, this artist created a modern urban legend.
Yeah.
They asked why. And the artist said that he likes creating fun adventures and that creates stories that bring people together. Like people will go on this adventure and then they have this shared experience and this story that they will carry with them and remember as being a really fun time.
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot about the way that folklore and legends are used to encode what's important to people in a given culture at a given time, or to transmit some sort of cultural value, or to preserve some sort of, if not exactly factual history, then some aspect of historical culture that was important to the people who chose to pass that on. And, so folklore changes over time, and we hear different versions of the same story across different generations because each generation is trying to preserve or encode something a little bit different each time they pass it on. So I love this as a way that something gets created more consciously in that sort of realm.
It is fascinating to me that it has crept along for 13 years as a creative writing exercise.
Yeah.
Right? I think that it's great. I think it's a thing that kids will continue to tell each other about because the tunnels exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're there.
So if correct me if I'm wrong, but if we draw the line between what is provably fact and what is demonstrably fiction, then basically everything in this story up to the existence of the two people who disappeared is true, right?
Yeah. So the tunnels are real. There are things drawn on the walls. The whole backstory with the murder mystery is fake.
The idea that people disappeared down there is fake, but everything else supporting it that a person now could experience is real.
Yeah, you could go and have fun with it. And I think that this is a good example of something that could draw folks in to do a little critical thinking and maybe lead them down the path of doing some independent research and learning more about their town.
Mm-hmm.
This
is something I've lived in Durham for 17 and a half years, and I've lived in the Triangle for 30 years and had never heard of this. Never, ever once.
Well, here we are.
Yeah.
And I learned about bright leaf tobacco.
There you go. You learned something. No, wait a minute. It's my turn to get to say it for once. I learned something today. I'm so happy.
So yeah, but here's the thing that was really sticking with me. Who is the lady in the picture?
Yeah, I want to know who that is.
I found it out.
Oh, okay. Let me stop talking.
You know how I get. Latch onto something and I won't let it go.
Yeah, no, I respect it.
So let's go back to sharing screens. Back to tunnel talk. Yep, and we're just going to have to skip through all the slides again because Charlie can't.
Cool pictures. It's cool.
Right.
It's this stuff is so neat. I love all of this.
Yeah, it's great. As someone that used to, kick around in places you shouldn't be, trying to go on adventures, I would love to have found something like this. So what I did was I took this lady's picture, and through the wonders of reverse image searching, I was able to figure it out.
It's amazing.
So this is Golda Genia Chaikin, a kindergarten teacher and school teacher from Dvinks, Latvia.
Okay.
So that was on one website. It was specifically a heritage tracking website about this region. And then I found another picture of her. So then I had a name and I had a region and I had a town, and there's her with her students in the 20s.
That's wild.
This is a real lady. I have no idea why the artist picked her picture. Yeah, real person.
She was a school teacher.
Yeah, in Europe.
I wonder if that person, the person who created all this, just Google image searched, old-fashioned school teacher picture or something.
Maybe.
I'm a school teacher.
So this site that I pulled this one from wasn't even in English.
That is wild.
I had to do the whole translate this page thing to get this one. And the other one was pretty far down a rabbit hole without a reverse image search. I'm not really sure how you can find it. So maybe they just thought that they were, doing enough. All right. I think I stopped screen sharing.
You did.
So yeah, that's pretty much it for that little urban legend out of Durham. I hope you liked it.
Yeah.
It seemed kind of weird and spooky, but not too scary. And it was an easy one. It had a lot of facts that were able to either be demonstrably true or false. And I got discouraged at first. And I was like, boo. But then when I found out the artist's motivation, I was like, this is fantastic. I'm on board.
Yeah, that's great. So I have 3 thoughts that I wrote down to revisit.
Mm-hmm.
One, the symbols in the tunnels made me think of the historical artifact known as hobo marks or hobo sign. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of made a weird comeback in the late 90s, early 2000s as a language of signs for Wi-Fi developed. And that kind of thing is always really fascinating to me. Something that is both hidden and out in the open, like a secret language of symbols that can be painted, in a place that other people would see. And other people might not be able to understand what they mean, but also other people might be able to figure out what they mean. That sort of thing really, that is right up my alley as something that is cool about history. And I immediately thought of that. And it makes me wonder, is there some sort of, some sort of encoded meaning in the variation in the symbols? That would be really neat to look into. Another thing is, you have demonstrated that that person did not exist. But something that we have often run into is that it is hard to find records of specific people sometimes, especially women, because there are so few official records of women in historical time periods. And finding records about enslaved people is almost impossible. So it is all very difficult to do. And that's just one of the things that's really frustrating when we try to dig into this stuff. And finding newspapers, especially historical newspapers, the State Library of North Carolina and a lot of other public libraries like the Durham County Public Library have access to services that will allow you to look up old historical newspaper articles. There will be scans, and some of them will even be OCR scans where the article has been turned into like a searchable text file and things like that. And we rely on that for a lot of our research. And so make use of those public library resources to let you to find the old newspapers that you might see referenced in something and think, well, there's no way I can verify that. In fact, there are a lot of places you can verify that, and they start with your public library.
That was a really great plug for public libraries. As we talk at the library, there you go.
I realized as I was saying it, it sounds like they paid me to say this, but it's true. Like the first thing I thought was, oh, well, the state library would tell us whether that was real,
Before we get to, I think there might be a question or two in the chat. Before we get to that, I want to let folks know that one of the things that we make it a point to do is send out freebies. So if you would like an Arcane Carolina sticker of our logo or something like that, you can send us an email at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com.
Which I just put in the chat.
There you go. And you should check us out at arcanecarolinas.com. You can find links to Libsyn, where you can listen to any of our episodes. I think we're up to like 45 or 46 now. We have stuff on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, mentioned Libsyn, Amazon Music. I always forget one.
All the places you would think to find them.
All the places you would think to listen to a podcast. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. And poor Michael bears the sole responsibility of managing the Twitter because I don't do it.
That's okay. I don't do Instagram. So
there you go.
Looking in the comments, I just want to say that, Elizabeth, I really liked your observation that the flash curing method is just like microwave ovens. Let's see. Should I just read through some of these?
Yeah, I see one. Wonder how sturdy the ceiling is. I don't want to find out.
Yeah, that is something I wondered. I mean, like with those I'm not an engineer. The impression I have is that with the lower ceilings and the curved walls, that the physics of the structure make it reasonably safe. But I don't know. Also, I like the observation that in the 80s, there were competing billboards promoting cigarettes and cardiac health care. Well, they do call us the city of medicine now. One leads directly to the other.
I like the urban treasure hunts in Raleigh. Similar thing, clues leading from one location to another until a prize is discovered. We've talked a little bit about that on some episodes.
I love that they came with a storyline. I never knew that. I've known people who do geocaching and stuff like that. I had no idea that they came with a story. That's awesome.
There is a question of where was the main tunnel entrance without giving specific geolocation coordinates. I will say that it is off the highway.
Off the highway.
So, there's that highway that runs, I want to say.
The Durham Freeway?
Yeah, that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to really hike based on all the accounts that I read, including ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
There you go.
They said, it's really far. We were tired at the end.
Yeah.
There's a question of what hilarious horror comedy means in my description on my publisher's website. I disagree with my publisher in that description. My publisher says that I write horror comedy. I say that I write horror that remembers that the situations in horror are sometimes so ridiculous that we find ourselves laughing instead of screaming. I'm also not totally sure that the line between horror and comedy exists anywhere other than in the mind of the person perceiving it. And so I don't know. I was at the Carolina Theater of Durham a couple of weeks ago for a horror film festival, and there were scenes where you could hear people gasp and other people laugh, and we were all watching the same movie. So I think I just write horror with a slight sense of humor. My publisher says it's really funny. I think maybe my publisher just has too low of a threshold for what's hilarious.
He laughs at my jokes, so probably.
I am going to jump in and interrupt you guys because I wanted to say something about the tunnels, which was thank you for the reminder not to go in them.
Yes.
Yes.
And I find they're kind of symbolic of the rabbit holes that you all go down to follow your stories. It must, I can just imagine you, digging and digging and digging. 40-something episodes is pretty impressive. And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about your favorite stories or something that weird that you found out while researching a story. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to hold up my Arcane Carolinas sticker and cozy on my water bottle.
Yay.
I'm at work, but you can also put other types of beverages in there. But I found it very useful. So these are the kind of things that you can get if you email these guys who are not making any money off of this and just doing it for the love of it.
This is a money-losing endeavor. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
Not that
This
we're
is like
not
the opposite of
money.
entrepreneurship.
It's that we're spending money.
What about karma? I mean, you're putting something great out there that people, I think, are going to really enjoy. So, and I'll let you answer the question.
I think my favorite experience in doing this was, so I really enjoyed, Michael did a story on the Brown Mountain Lights. And I really enjoyed that a lot, taking that information in, because that was news to me. But what I really liked about it is when I was out and we ran into someone that had listened to it with their son and their son's grandmother. And it sparked this whole generational conversation across generations about folklore and legends. And, they shared stories in a way that I think the kid will remember when they're older.
I hope it brings up memories for people who are watching, and they will type in the chat, any sort of leads that they might want you to follow.
I think for me, my favorite episode, I'm going to give the honest answer, and it's not cheating. It's not trying to bait people on a hook, but this coming Sunday, Halloween, we have an episode slated to be published called The Ghost Town of Goshen Hill, South Carolina. And that's a legend that a bunch of people asked us to cover, and I'd never heard of it, and got to do a ton of really deep historical research into the people who figure in this legend and discover all this weird real history of the place where it happens, and was stunned by how much of this legend is verifiably true, and came away from it with a really strong sense that there really is a there. Similarly, in Cleveland County, North Carolina, we did an episode over the summer about a Sasquatch sighting of a local Sasquatch mascot, sort of, named Nobby. And that was a really fun episode to research, because I was kind of surprised by how much there was to that story, but also because there's so much of that story was about the humanizing aspects of it, and finding these really considerate, compassionate people who figured highly in this story. I think a lot of times legends that are in the weird stuff category are about we're going to go hunt the Bigfoot and skin it and bring it back and prove it and whatever. And you don't run into a lot of legends in sort of the more popular versions of these that are about compassion and consideration. And finding those is always a real treasure to me.
It looks like we had a question. How long does it take you to research an episode? That really depends on, for me, it depends on how recent the legend originated. Because if it's like this one and it's from 1908 and it's got all these names of like people in public office and stuff, it's pretty easy to go to those and fact check that. When you start getting into stuff, The Devil and Hezekiah Jones is an episode we did. That took me forever. That's a really good episode. And it goes back to, I want to say, the late 1700s. We had to comb through all kinds of genealogical records and shipbuilding logs. And try to
U.S. military records.
U.S. military records and correlate like, okay, well, we know that these people were working in a shipbuilding yard here. And we know that this person here was registered in the military. And we do have a death record here of somebody that was the age that could have been at that point at this time and that kind of thing.
In terms of Native American legends of spirit-driven sites in the Piedmont, I think the closest we've got for the Piedmont isn't really the Piedmont necessarily. It's Chimney Rock, and which is, foothills. Like it's sort of western North Carolina. And partly when it comes to Native American legends, we have talked about a couple of Native American legends where we did like really deep research. That's another of my candidates for favorite is the Moon-Eyed People. But a lot of times we hesitate to discuss those in part because we are not ourselves Native American. We don't want to misrepresent Native American belief and practice. And a lot of what's written about them has been to misrepresent them.
We are way open to finding an expert source on that.
Yes. We would love to have a Native American who could talk to us about these legends.
Because we have been asking for that since we started this, since there are so many in North Carolina that we're just like, oh, that would be a really good one, but I don't want to speak to it. So
I just don't want to appropriate it.
If you know somebody that could speak to some of those legends, please don't hesitate to send them our way.
Yes.
Very nice. I really enjoyed meeting you guys at the Carolina Theater. That was a great event because I love the Retro Phantasma and the horror films and everything they do there in that historic theater, which is a little creepy too.
Yeah.
If you're back in the backstage. Do you have
an
any
episode about that too?
We did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I hope everybody listening and watching will check out their podcasts on arcanecarolinas.com. And my last question was, do you have any upcoming meet and greets planned by any chance?
We're going, Michael, you're going to have to do the date for me. What was the date at the bar downtown?
We're talking to Arcana because, why not? Arcana right there, sort of on the backside of Main Street, sort of looking out across the American Tobacco campus. If you were in Durham in the 80s, then you might have also heard of Power Company, and it's right down, like 4 doors down from where Power Company was. But we're going to do something there. And it turns out that is September 29th.
Well, stay tuned and watch the website and stay in touch with you guys. And if you have any final words, I hope you'll share them. But I did want to take the opportunity to thank you very much for agreeing to come on the program and sharing what you do.
Anytime. This is fun. Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
You're
thank you so much
welcome.
for letting us be here. This is really great.
We got some applause. Hey, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Arcane Carolinas. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I'm your other co-host, multi-award-winning novelist Michael G. Williams.
We have a very, very special episode today where we have a Myrtle Beach correspondent, Gary Mitchel.
Yeah, Gary has heard us talk about UFOs over Myrtle Beach and contacted us to say he wanted to give us an important report from on the scene.
We're going to cut over to Gary.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I love the podcast.
Gary, can you tell us what you've seen?
Absolutely nothing.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thanks for listening. Hey, Michael here. That was something that we recorded with a really great friend of the show, Gary Mitchel, at Congregate when we were in Winston-Salem in July of this year. Gary is one of the co-runners for the American Sci-Fi Classics track at DragonCon, who have been kind enough to host us for video episodes in the past. We didn't have the opportunity to do anything this year just because we were too busy trying to get ready for the fall Spooky Spectacular, but we got to see Gary at Congregate. It was really wonderful to get to see him there. We just wanted to record something quick and fun. And Gary, we hope you had a fun and safe DragonCon. We wish we could be there. Maybe someday. Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at www.michaelgwilliamsbooks.com and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.